What's up everybody, I'm Ty Campbell, this is Tekin Builds, and this is our Vanquish VS4-10 Pro Black kit that we are right in the middle of assembling. Last week we got our rolling chassis completely put together and got it sitting on its own suspension and its own wheels and tires. The body is done. Luckily I did that a couple of weeks ago. Now we're going to get into getting our electronics mounted in the truck. So we're going to put a T-360 steering servo in. We are going to put a ROC412 3100 kV motor in. I decided to change that, and there's some other reasons that I will get into later when we're installing that motor. We're going to put an RX4 element-proof ESC in, and then we're going to drop our Spectrum receiver in, get our ProTech 4S pack in there on the side plate, and take this thing out and hit the trails. Let's take a look at some of the gear we're going to install on our VS4-10 Pro Black kit. RX4 Element Proof ESC. This is a brushed brushless ESC, so you can run a brushed motor or brushless motor. It is element proof, meaning that it can take splashes and playing in the snow and the mud. You really don't have to worry about that. It's good for up to 6S and is definitely plenty powerful for scaling. We have the ROC412 element proof motor. It is a 3100 kV motor that we're going to run on 4-cell, and it is 540 size to fit the VFD transmission. The T-360 steering servo, also element proof. You really don't have to worry about water, snow, ice, any of that stuff. It is about 380 ounces of torque at 7.4 volts. Then that's the high voltage BEC setting in our RX4 that we are going to run it at. And our Spectrum SR315 receiver. This is a 3-channel receiver. 3 channels is all I need. We're going to use that 3rd channel to actually be able to adjust our drag brake from our transmitter. There's a video on how to set that up in the Tekin clinic, and it is an awesome feature for rock crawling. I love being able to change the drag brake on the fly, and I do it all the time. The first thing to go in is the servo. It's really easy to put in. You just drop it right into the servo mount and secure it with the 4 washer top screws provided in the VS4-10 kit. The next part we're going to throw in is our ROC412 motor. Now I already pulled the screws out of the transmission holding it into the chassis, and then disconnect the drive shafts and pull the whole thing right out the top. With the transmission out of the truck, we can remove the gear cover and place the motor into the motor mount, making sure the tabs are clocked out to the side so that we can get to them later, and secure the motor with 2 M3 screws and 2 conical washers. To install the pinion, I rotate the motor shaft so that I can get to the flat spot, slide the pinion onto the motor shaft, and lock it in place with the grub screw. This 10-tooth pinion should provide me with some really good low-end control, since I'm going down from the recommended 15-tooth that the kit says to use. But we're running a 3100 kV motor on 4S, so I think going down in gearing is going to be a great option. With the pinion on and centered with the spur gear, we just lock the motor down, make sure that we set the mesh so that there's a little bit of play on the gears all the way around. You'll normally check it in 4 spots. And once the mesh is set right, we can put this back inside the truck. Now that we have our motor mounted in our transmission and the gear mesh set properly, we can put the gear cover back on the transmission assembly and put the whole thing back in the truck and start replacing the hardware. With the transmission secured in place, all we have to do is hook up the front and rear drive shaft, and that's a job done for the motor install. Now I've decided to run the battery on one of the rock slider plates instead of the battery tray that Vanquish includes in the kit. So I use one single Velcro strap that is included in the kit and put the side plate on the passenger side of the truck. The ESC is going to go on the driver's side. I already stuck the RX4 down to the plate, so I'm just going to go ahead and mock this up for soldering. And to tuck the wiring and make it look a little cleaner, I decided to route my sensor harness from the motor underneath this electronics plate and run it right up to the sensor port on the RX4. Now that the electronics are mocked up in the vehicle, I can go ahead and get started on soldering, and I always start with the battery plug. I'm using a Dean's Ultra connector because that's what my ProTech pack came with, and I'm a big fan of Dean's, been using them a long time. So I cut 2 pieces of wire to approximately the right length that I think I'm going to need. Strip each one, tin the exposed ends, and then solder them to our Dean's connector. Once they're soldered and cooled off, I put a little bit of shrink tube over them and hit it with a lighter. That way our connections are nice and protected. Now it's time to prep the RX4 to receive all of our connections, so we tin each one of the 5 posts on the ESC with a little bit of solder. With our ESC post fully tinned, we can go ahead and attach our battery wire. It's 2 connections, positive and negative. Make sure you get them right. All we have to do to attach a tinned wire to an already tinned post is heat up one element, heat up the other, bring them both together, apply heat, and it should flow in about 2 to 3 seconds. So once the battery wire is on, it's time to get onto the 3 motor wires that go to the ROC412. With the ESC post already tinned and the end of the wire already stripped and tinned, we just heat up the wire, heat up the post, apply heat to both, and flow that together. Once the ESC side is done, we go over to the motor side, and I like to leave a little bit of slack in the wire just so it's not tight. Clip it to the length that it needs to be, strip the end and give the braids a little twist. And with that tinned up, we're going to also tin up the motor solder tab. And then soldering is the exact same as on the ESC post. We just heat up the wire, heat up the solder tab, bring them both together, apply heat, and it should flow within 2 to 3 seconds. So with that one done, we'll go ahead and knock the other 2 out and finish up our solder job. I'm pretty happy with the layout in this truck. Having the ESC on the opposite side of the motor tabs allowed me to have all 3 of my motor wires be about the same length. And the battery wire doesn't have to be crazy long because we're going to run the ProTech 4S over there on that side saddle electronics plate. So now we can drop our receiver in and start getting our wires run to that back fuel cell box. And we're going to have to extend a couple of things, and then I've got a little trick up my sleeve to hide all of it and tuck it away nicely. Because of the location of the receiver box being in the back of the truck and the servo is clear up at the front, I had to create a servo wire extension that just has a plug on it. I also had to extend the auxiliary drag brake wire, or the programming wire that came with the RX4. It wasn't quite long enough to reach the receiver box. To tuck all the wiring and clean the truck up a bit, I tucked all 3 of those wires, the servo wire, the ESC wire, and the drag brake wire that goes to our receiver box, into a sleeve. And the sleeve came from one of our 200mm sensor wires that I did cut up, and then I just fished all the wires through to give it a nice appearance. Now that everything's wired up and installed in the chassis, the last thing that I need to do is bind the receiver to the radio. Spektrum makes this real easy on these new receivers. You just press and hold the button while you turn the power on and the light begins to blink. You go to bind on the radio, it'll link up pretty quickly, and then I calibrate the RX4 so that it knows where full throttle, full brake, reverse signal, and neutral signal are. Make sure that I have forward and reverse. I pop the top of the fuel cell electronics box on and screw that down. And the last thing I have to do is hook up the steering servo linkage. Now the servo needs to be powered on and in the center so that we can get the arm as close as we can get it to the center. And you can adjust the trim of the wheels by either trimming the radio or lengthening or shortening the drag link. So with the servo on and centered, I place the vector servo horn on and then attach the steering link with an M3 screw and some Loctite. I check my endpoints because you want to make sure that the endpoints are not too far out, so you don't want to hyperextend any of the linkages or the CV axles or the universals. Last piece of the chassis is getting the inner fender liners mounted up. These hook up really easy and are held on with a couple screws on each side and secure underneath the electronics plate. I'm really happy with the wiring in this truck. I think it came out really clean. Everything is relatively short and nothing is messy. So the last thing to do is put the body on this thing and take it outside. The electronics are in. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to take this thing outside. So, see ya. Well, that is pretty much a wrap on our VS4-10 Pro build. There's a couple more things I'm going to do to finish up this truck later, like get some lights in there, add some more scale accessories inside, maybe detail out the interior a little bit more, and yes, I will put a driver in the truck eventually. I just need to find something that I like. Next time, we're going to start building a street eliminator car so that we can go out and tear up some asphalt. I've got a Proline Pro 2 SCB chassis laying around that we're going to take a bunch of Proline parts and put a street car together. I'm excited for that build because I just want to have something that I can throw a bunch of power at and go out and have fun in the street. Probably break some stuff. If you liked the video, click the like button, share with your friends so they can join in on the fun, subscribe so you don't miss out on the scale drag race videos coming up next. I'm Ty Campbell. We'll see you next time.